Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, Monrovia, about to have a conversation with Mark Anderson of the Drake Organic Spirits Company. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for your podcasting, and sponsored by the Original Wine of the Month Club, now sporting the organic series of wines as well as the rosé series of wines. Hey, we have an episode coming out, Leah Poveda, and she is one of the most intoxicating guests. Not that Mark's not going to be, but one of the most intoxicating guests I've had on the show in a long time. She was in studio. She is the export manager for Glenelly Estate in South Africa, which is actually a Bordeaux house. It was a fascinating conversation. Have a listen to that. But while we're here today, we're going to have a conversation with Mark Anderson of Drake Organic Spirits. Welcome to the show, Mark. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Paula. Good morning. Glad to be here.
I know you're in Vegas. Is this a spirit show you're going to?
The trade show is called Supply Side West, and it's a ingredient type of trade show for supplying food, beverage manufacturers. And of course, one of the ingredients that they buy is organic alcohol.
Organic alcohol, which I can't wait to peel that back a little bit just to understand a little better. But the Drake Organic Spirits is a certified USDA organic, gluten-free, non-GMO, vegan, keto, kosher. I mean, I don't know if there's any more accolades you could put to that, but you are one of the largest suppliers of cane alcohol in the business world. And also you have a whole product line of organic spirits as well as pre-mixed cocktails, or Boxtails as you call them. But your career didn't start there. You were a commodities broker for grain. Is that what you were doing?
Well, Paul, not a broker. I was a trader and market maker. So,
okay.
So I was actually in the pit of the commodity exchange in Chicago and Minneapolis, trading the commodities back and forth, making the market.
And so would that include, for instance, the grains you might be using today in your product?
It included all commodities, whether it was precious metals, derivatives, but that led me into trading in the physical side of the commodities. And primarily in the beginning, it was a lot of dairy, and then moved into all commodities. My specialty was arbitraging physicals against the derivatives on the board of trade.
Oh, everybody does this. I mean, it was pretty
But I grew up on a farm in North Dakota, and I saw the movie Trading Places in 1995.
So funny.
And I said, "You mean to tell me you could do this on paper?" So I found the closest grain exchange that was the least expensive to lease a seat for $15 a month. Moved to Minneapolis with a credit card and started trading on the exchange.
That's amazing, because that was actually one of the questions that popped into my head when you were explaining your career there was, is it really like Trading Places where, the guys...
That's why I started doing it.
That is so funny. And one of the great movies, for entertainment for sure. So is that sort of where the idea of organic spirits came? Because organic, it's sort of it's not a new thing. I think it's been around for a long, long time. I have a book behind me here for the biodynamic movement by Robert Steiner. What made you think of the idea that there's a need for organic distilled spirits?
Sure. So in 2008, I started a company called Captain Drake, and that's after my career as a commodity trader in the grain exchange. And in 2008, realizing that 96% of the United States corn, 93% of the soybeans, and 100% of the sugar beets are all genetically modified, that the supply chain for protein and starch in the United States was primarily all GMO grains or ingredients. So I researched and found out that in Thailand, all of their citric acid is made from non-GMO tapioca starch. So I bought half of the country's citric acid and started moving it into different industries in the United States, primarily the beverage industry, supplying companies like Coke, Dr. Pepper, Kraft, Unilever with non-GMO citric acid. And then in 2010, I changed the supply chain, moving it closer to the United States, and found citric acid produced in South America from cane sugar, which is non-GMO, and then progressed to sourcing quite a bit of that country's citric acid moving into the United States. And that allowed me to get into um, the sugar quota meetings in 2011 and achieved securing one of the largest organic cane sugar quotas to the United States. And that's how we became large suppliers of USDA organic cane sugar and non-GMO citric acid. And then in 2012, the non-GMO project came into the picture for the food and beverage industry and was one of the fastest growing third-party certifications that one could achieve, guaranteeing that the whole product supply chain was verified and audited non-GMO. And we became the first company in the world to be non-GMO project verified for citric acid and cane sugar, which gave us a great strategic advantage of first mover with any company that wanted a retail finished product that would be non-GMO verified and organic. As time progressed, we were supplying a lot of the non-GMO citric to the extract manufacturers producing extracts for the food industry and beverage industry. But back then, organic alcohol didn't really exist on a commercial volume basis. And one of the extract companies asked if we could supply non-GMO project verified alcohol that was organic. And I said, sure. Then I had to figure out how to do that. And
when was that? What year
that was
that?
in 2014.
So what from on a graph? Let's say I was to graph the movement of non-GMO alcohol or non-GMO, and I want to peel back the citric acid comment in a second. But if I was to graph or the growth, would it be an exponential thing? From 2014, let's say, to 2022, would this be this extraordinarily steep curve in the need or the want for non-GMO alcohol or cane sugar-based distilled spirits?
The demand certainly has taken a hockey stick graph approach around 2020 was really the growth in the industry and led, if you go back around 2001, Whole Foods really entered the market for consumers with organic shopping, grocery shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And then around 2008, non-GMO became an interesting part of food labeling where I think large companies realized, due to the supply chain in the US with all of GMO protein and starch, that their labeling liability was, say, higher risk if they were claiming non-GMO on their finished products, because so many of the ingredients in the United States are produced from GMO corn or soybeans or sugar beets.
Mm-hmm. So let's peel that back a second. First of all, I wanted to discuss for the listeners organic versus GMO. And organic, of course, is a process of growing. There's certifications in the U.S., there's certifications in Europe that are different, and that's just farming practices and processing practices as well, versus GMO, which is genetically modified. Those are two entirely different things, right?
Correct. And different tolerances in the certifying bodies. USDA Organic, of course, a government agency requiring audits, a lot of paper trail annually with inspections of your the crops and the land that the crops are planted on. It takes roughly 3 years to establish the ground as organic. The fourth year, your crop can be certified USDA Organic. So if you're looking at the spirits industry, for instance, tequila, agave, it takes 7 years for agave to mature. It takes 4 years to get your organic certificate for your crop, your agave plants. So you're looking at quite a long time before you get your first drop of organic tequila that is legitimately and officially with the USDA Organic certification.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think for the listeners, just they understand the agave plant, which is the base for for tequila, is a 7 year growth before it's full maturity to produce. I think what each plant produces like one case of tequila or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
I mean, I just the vision of that when you go to Mexico and you look at how large these farms must be if each plant is only one case of tequila or around that, and then you travel the world and you have tequila everywhere. And now the advance of craft spirits, there's even more. It's like that's a very expensive proposition to wait 11 years before you get to sell anything, and not even knowing then at that point if it's going to be successful. Are you saying that if I presented to the FDA a sugar beet that was a hybrid, a natural hybrid to, let's say, protect against warm weather or something, versus one that was genetically modified to do that, would they be able to tell, or if they couldn't tell, what do they do?
Certainly, yes. By the analysis of the protein molecule, you could tell if it's genetically modified plant. Sugar beets in the United States primarily are genetically modified. However, sugar beets in Austria, for instance, are not GMO. So there are varieties that are not GMO, and there are GMO varieties. And in the U.S., all of the cane sugar or sugar beets are genetically modified.
And is there a value to? I mean, up until this movement, which you're saying, let's just say it's from 2000, early 2000s, where the idea of non-GMO became aware to the public, then the value of genetically modifying, let's just say you're trying to modify a sugar beet to do something, one thing in particular, not the many facets and varieties in the molecules that we can play with, that there's a value, there's a negative value to a genetically modified sugar beet. In this case, I'm not being too articulate, but in this case, to, let's just say, protect itself from extreme weather, if that's what we're modifying the plant for, that you're choosing that one set of genes to fix itself.
Sure.
Is that a human hazard?
Well, so I can take this position. I have an agricultural background growing up in North Dakota on a farm raising um, grains, wheat, soybeans, corn. And on that farm, which is still farmed today by my family, they grow both GMO soybeans and corn, and they also grow varieties that are non-GMO.
Mm-hmm.
And when GMO actually became an item in the market was around 1996. So I was, born in 1970, so I'm 52. That gave me about 20 years roughly of being on the farm, knowing how the whole cycle works. And in 96, when Syngenta and Monsanto introduced GMO seeds, the promise was higher yields, drought resistant, insect resistant, and they did that by changing the protein molecules. So if, for instance, in corn, if there was a worm or a mole beetle, and they ate the seed, they would die.
Mm-hmm.
The change with the protein molecule also allowed for sprays to be sprayed on that crop to kill weeds, but it wouldn't kill the corn or the soybeans or whatever the GMO seed was.
Mm-hmm.
So what that allowed the farms to do was to increase the farm size, the acreage. From 1996 till today, the acres of a typical farm have increased because the labor requirements have decreased. And of course, farming equipment has helped substantially with that. But, your typical farm back in 1996 was maybe 1,200 to 2,000 acres in the Midwest. And you needed labor. You needed labor to run the cultivators, to cultivate the weeds, because you weren't spraying. So prior to 96, that's how everybody farmed. After 96, people sprayed. And the spray increased and increased because the crop sizes of GMO seed increased. So farm sizes increased then to an average of around, this is a guess, but I would say around 4,000 to 5,000 acres because you didn't require as much labor. Like with sugar beets prior to 96, you needed a lot of field laborers to go through the fields and hoe the weeds out, um, to de-weed the fields. And after 96, you didn't need all of those laborers. You were just spraying the fields with Roundup Ready or whatever herbicide to kill the weeds. And that was the biggest benefit of GMO was the labor reduction. We could take a look at your profitability or your yields, and you could see that GMO versus non-GMO, not much difference in yield.
Hmm.
Uh, when you look at your return on your investment for GMO versus non-GMO, you have a much higher return from your crop with non-GMO because your seed that you're planting in the beginning of the year is less expensive because there's no patent on the traits that you're
Mm-hmm.
paying for Monsanto or Syngenta. And when you go to sell that, you have premiums because non-GMO is actually more rare or harder to find than GMO. 96% of all the corn is genetically modified. So there is a benefit. You've also seen organic acreage increasing year over year, and that's a result of demand. And going back to 2001, when Whole Foods really entered the market, this price discovery was laid out where maybe the consumer would uh, choose an organic product over a conventional product because of the health perception,
Mm-hmm.
or but as long as it was with 5 to 6% of a conventional price, they found out that consumers would tend or trend towards the perceived healthier option. And I say perceived because not to get into what's scientifically healthy or not, or it it really doesn't matter if there's a demand for something um, in a specific space that creates value. Those are the types of commodities that we searched for. So getting into some of the Captain Drake side of this story, around 2008, I spent a lot of time with my wife Kristen traveling around the globe searching for organic and non-GMO ingredients, but specifically two ingredients are found in 85% of all food and beverage. And those two ingredients are citric acid and sugar.
That's interesting. You're shedding a lot of light on some interesting subjects here when it comes to this, and one of them is, I've read many times that organic farming and biodynamic farming can't feed the world. It just doesn't produce enough. But at the same time, and this is in the GMO being different, but it's the
Yeah.
same concept in that you got to get certified and it takes time and all that happens. And then are we getting yields out of that crop that are going to be beneficial from the business standpoint? That's what we have. That's what it comes down to. I mean, making wine is an expensive proposition. It's the same problem. You have to wait 3 years, 4 or 5 years just to get a crop. Then maybe you'll make some wine and sell some if you're not going to age it in barrels. And so the profitability of this venture takes quite a while just to think about. And here we have, yield issues and cost issues, and are we going to be able to sell more? And you're saying, yeah, we get a better return in the market for a non-GMO product.
Yeah, I smile when you said the statement about feeding the world, because how did we feed the world before 1996 when GMOs came into the market? The ability of growing crops without using pesticides and herbicides is absolutely possible. The yields when you match a GMO crop to a non-GMO crop are roughly the same.
Hmm.
Uh, you can look at the key crops that are grown around the world and what are the biggest ones that are GMO, and you can look at corn, soybeans, cotton, but there are parts of the globe that don't allow GMOs because they don't want that cross pollination or the contamination of the traits of that seed that has patented technology. So
Mm-hmm.
if that pollen transfers to a next door field that has non-GMO, and that farmer goes to harvest that crop, and they then plant some of the seed the following year. And now they're in a situation of patent infringement
Mm-hmm.
because your next door neighbor planted a GMO crop and you're planting a non-GMO crop, and now your crop has traits of a.
Wow.
So there's a lot to it, and there are some countries that resist having GMOs just because of food security.
Right.
When you think about it, if your whole food supply depends on GMO technology, which is controlled by another country, you're kind of losing control of your food supply.
How many different hybrids, natural hybrids of corn are there approximately?
Oh goodness, that
Thousands.
one I'm not even going to guess that. I can tell you that I believe potatoes have around 4 or 5 thousand different varieties.
I mean, I read there was 40,000 different varieties of wheat.
Possibly.
And so the difference between something like a naturally breaded wheat to do something versus one that's been genetically modified would be, is it necessarily harmful? We talked about it for a second, that we're not necessarily talking about human, maladies because of this, but that's possible because it's not a natural exchange of molecules or change of molecules. But is that the general gist of GMO versus non-GMO? Is that just perceived value of health benefits because it's not done in the lab versus a hybrid?
I think if you get into the discussion of health, you can take that a lot of different ways. But
Yeah.
if the consumer is also choosing organic or non-GMO because they think it's more sustainable, better for the environment, which you can scientifically prove that
Right.
spraying less pesticides and herbicides on the land and water supplies where the water runoff goes to, um, there's a very black and white that
Sure.
non-GMO and organic are much better for the environment. And you can make the statement probably that they're better for. So our slogan is better for you, better for the planet for Drake's Organic Spirits.
I smile because my wife, who's been very conscientious about her intake lately and working on dieting, so to speak, but she's a huge fan of the skinny popcorn, right? Which is now organic. This is non-GMO all over the place, and she feels like it's almost, I mean, almost looks like it's health food by the time, she consumes the 100-calorie bag. And I'll say I'm a culprit of the same thought process, but it's pretty funny. But it's interesting. I firmly believe that sustainability is a very important part of, particularly in the farm industry, whether it's grapes or wheat or corn. I think it's a responsibility of the business owner and the farm owner to be as sustainable as possible, because I think it's just better for the whole environment. I haven't necessarily bought off on the organic wine movement because it's an excuse in some cases for them to taste like kombucha when like you're saying, prior to a certain date, everybody was organic. Everybody was biodynamic pretty much. There weren't these other things to do to add to a crop. You cross cropped and you cover cropped and you do all the things you need to replenish the soil with its nutrients, and then you went to the next vintage of whatever you're growing. So I in the wine world, I definitely think it's a very important thing. And one of the comments I get when you kind of brought it up from a lot of winemakers, particularly European, is my kids are playing in that vineyard. They're crawling around in the dirt. I don't want them coming into the house with pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides. It's just common sense at some point.
Absolutely. And scientifically, it has been proven that there is a correlation between certain cancers and the use of different
Mm-hmm.
chemicals. And it's gone through the court system now over the last 20 years, and there's been a lot of discovery and a lot of information that is available that does correlate that. So, listen, when it comes to the health side of it, um, the consumer really can now decide if they want to vote with their dollars and buy organic or buy conventional, and whether they're doing it for health or they're doing it for sustainable renewal and better for the planet. Um, whatever the reason, they now have a better choice today and availability than they did last year, 5 years ago, certainly 20 years ago. So it's great to see. And then the price coming down from, it may have started with a much larger spread between organic pricing to conventional pricing. But really today, the growth of organic, the pricing difference is, in a lot of cases, less than 5% of a price premium for organic. And when you take that into account with all of the additional audits and paper trails and work that needs to be done, it is more labor intensive. There is more work to it. However, once it gets established, then your upfront costs are pretty well done, and you're actually producing for less because, like I said, your yields are about the same, but you have lower input cost because your seed isn't a patented seed. You could replant that seed after you harvest it. So there are a lot of benefits of using conventional.
A lot of moving parts in that. And if I hear one more Camp Lejeune commercial, I'm going to shoot myself.
They're not a sponsor, are they?
No, they're not a sponsor. And there was, I was just thinking about when you're talking about this, that there was back, I don't know, maybe it was the 70s or 80s, that a congressman or a lobbyist for one of the chemical companies took a shot of malathion in a Senate hearing, saying there's nothing wrong with this stuff, and they actually drank it. And I wonder what happened to the guy. I don't know if he's still, still with us.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the consumer side of this. This is a fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate peeling this back for us. So you're making what would be normally considered rum, right? I mean, if it's cane sugar distillate, it would be normally called rum, but I'm not sure those definitions apply still in the consumer side. That's what they used to be. Distilled agave was tequila, neutral grain was bourbon or vodka, and then cane sugar was rum. Are those definitions still accurate, or because I've seen grape-based vodka, which I'm not sure makes sense. It's usually brandy, so I'm not sure what's happening in the marketplace of premium spirits.
Sure. So by definition, rum has to be produced from molasses or sugar. There is no definition for producing vodka. Primarily a starch or a sugar is used, but it's the distillation point that makes it available for vodka. You have to distill up to and above 190 proof for vodka. To achieve rum, you have to start with a base of molasses or sugar, but you cannot distill above 189.9. So technically, the definition for rum is the base of sugar or molasses, and the distillation cannot go above 189.9.
That's interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
So by switching our supply chain and growing the organic cane sugar supply chain for the U.S., we actually have multiple channels that we can go into. The first channel, obviously, which you mentioned, was rum, and we do a absolute terrific organic white rum and an organic spiced rum. The other main product that we produce and highest volume is organic vodka, and we produce that also from organic cane sugar, because by definition we distill above 190, actually 96% or 193 for our vodka. So when we distill organic cane sugar and produce the 96% alcohol, that's done in South America, which makes it way more efficient doing the distillation right by the organic cane fields at the base of the Andes Mountains in Colombia. And then we ship that 96% alcohol to the United States, where we decide if we're going into the industrial side for further food manufacturing, if we're going into our bottling side, where we're bottling our organic spirits, or
Mm-hmm.
if we're going into our consumer packaged products that we have innovated, such as the spiked ice, which is a freeze and eat adult popsicle with all organic ingredients. And then our other product that I'm sure we'll talk about is our box cocktails, which are called Boxtails. And the production of those is also at another co-packing facility that we work with. So just making more efficient supply chain channels, not shipping water or air, because anytime you're doing that, it increases your cost, increases carbon footprint, makes the supply chain less efficient. So by knowing, and having a background of agriculture, supply chains, commodities, it's kind of allowed me to put puzzle pieces together and create one of the most efficient supply chains that hasn't existed in the United States, which is organic cane alcohol in a commercial volume availability. In the United States, they haven't been able to produce a commercial volume availability of organic cane alcohol because most of the cane sugar in the United States grows at a latitude that it doesn't allow it to ripen fast enough. So
Hmm.
those cane fields have to be sprayed with, guess what? Roundup. And the Roundup will ripen the cane so it can be harvested within the typical season. Therefore, a lot of the cane sugar in the United States, even though it may not be GMO seed, um, there are Roundup or other chemicals that are sprayed on it that would not allow it to be considered organic or non-GMO.
That's another commercial I'm getting tired of seeing. The Roundup lawsuit.
Yes.
How important is the base grain, in this case sugar beets or cane
Sure.
sugar
Cane
or
sugar.
corn, to the flavor of this 190 plus proof vodka?
Yes, absolutely. There is night and day difference. So when consumers will do a blind taste test of our organic vodka made from cane sugar compared to a vodka that's made from the typical grain based, the initial sensory of the grain base is more of a medicinal with a burn aftertaste.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cane sugar, compared to that, has a light, it's very smooth with a light, sweet aftertaste. So there is a substantial difference in the flavor profile and taste profile between grain alcohol, ethanol, or cane alcohol. And again, organic cane sugar fields haven't existed in commercial volume availability in the United States, which is why it has to be sourced and produced from South America.
So if you're saying it's 190 proof, let's just say it's 95% alcohol. That 5%. And the reason I brought this up is sort of colloquial and it's funny because I have actually my drywall contractor here in the San Gabriel Valley comes by and collects all my leftover tasting samples and wines that I never even open, and he distills them. And so we know a wine's only 14% alcohol, so you get 2 ounces out of a 25 ounce bottle. But sometimes I give him just bad wines that I taste them, they're just bad, and
Mm.
his resulting 100 proof or 200 proof distillate or 199 proof is really bad. It just doesn't taste good, and that's why I brought it up because I'm trying to figure out why, if you distill this stuff off, how is it that there's still? But I'm guessing it's that 5% of that's not alcohol is creating the flavor profile and the burn profile and all the things you just mentioned. That's how important the root product is to making a distilled alcohol. How is you mentioned that and we'll get into the consumer side of this. We still got a little bit of time. Um, how, you mentioned that cane sugar doesn't ripen in the latitudes of the U.S. that well, and there's been a huge movement in the wine world to districts that traditionally weren't growing grapes of consequence that you could make decent wine from. There are parts of Burgundy, France now that are making really good wines that prior were considered village or something less. And climate change has associated that. And being this is not a political show, so we won't get into the reason as to why there's climate change, but it does. It's clear that at this moment there's a rising temperature and it's affecting the crops. Has that affected the cane sugar crops in the U.S.?
Yes, and let me lay a little more information out there. So, when you look at how much of the ethanol and alcohol is produced from corn, for instance, in the United States, you know, most of the alcohol that's produced is coming from corn, which is genetically modified. You compare that to sugarcane. Sugarcane is a grass and it's a fast growing grass. So in South America, you plant the sugarcane and you can achieve around 2 crops per year for 4 years
Mm.
before you have to replant that sugarcane. So that grass is growing like the grass in your yard, absorbing CO2 and emitting oxygen. So it's scrubbing the air. And when you cut it, it grows again faster. But you're getting 2 crops every season for 4 years
Mm-hmm.
before you have to till the ground. Putting your if it's corn, you're putting in your fertilizer, then you're spraying it multiple times during the year, then you're harvesting it. So it's a huge carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what has had to be done to produce the food in the U.S. and other parts of the world. But sugarcane is 2 crops a year for 4 years. You're not tilling the ground. There's less erosion. There's less water usage. It's much more environmentally friendly and sustainable. So when you're choosing alcohol made from sugarcane, you can show that it's a smaller carbon footprint, sustainable compared to what a majority of the alcohol is produced from, which is grain, corn.
My dad had an avocado farm, and that's a two crop per year product. One crop is slightly less than the other, but he did it, and he was able to increase the productivity of that. It's all organic at the time by 30% by introducing bees and citrus trees amongst the orchard, and was able to raise his crop without sacrificing his value of the quality of the avocados. Are those things exist in the world, in the giant farm world, where we're introducing natural ways to pollinate and to, move nutrients across the soil?
I think one of the industries that is always looking for how to do it better is the agricultural side. And you find somebody on a farm, they have to figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
And if equipment breaks or if your yields are down, you're the one that's responsible. You're trying to figure it out. So I think, yeah, I think that's
Interesting.
kind of how it is.
So I now we know how we got to the shelf, and so I'm a consumer. I'm looking for Drake's organic spirits. What do I see on the shelf, and where do I see it?
Yeah, so we're distributed throughout 48 states and 5 countries. You can go to drakesorganic.com and find our location finder for a store near you. Um, we are also available online. So we carry a full line of organic non-GMO spirits that are certified gluten-free, vegan, and kosher. And we also have our adult popsicles called spiked ice and our adult box cocktails called Boxtails that have 1.75 liters of 12% mixed cocktails in a boxed wine format. And again, we did that for sustainability because for every 1.75 liters of Boxtails, it eliminates about 5 cans of seltzer. So you have
Mm-hmm.
less aluminum, less cans going into the landfills because, what last year there were about 12, 14 billion cans of seltzer produced and less than 30% get recycled. So that's a mountain of, waste that's going out compared to a boxed wine format, you have cardboard and a pour spout. So, consumer recycled cardboard to produce the box, and it compacts so you can ship one semi load that'll have, the equivalent of 9 truckloads of cans. So again, less carbon footprint. So we really set up the supply chain to be truly carbon negative and sustainable. So, like I said, our motto is better for you, better for the planet.
Let's go back to the human side of this for a second. This fascinates me a lot, and I might say this sarcastically, but there's the vegan movement in wine, and wine it's obvious the vegan portion because there's certain fining agents that would be considered non-vegan, egg whites and some shellfish products. And so people always ask, what do you mean vegan wine? In fact, I had an interview with John Sally, the famed Laker, four-time NBA champion, and he was selling at the time, this is years ago, a vegan wine. And it actually said fine vegan wine on the label. And he says, I'm having trouble selling this in the restaurants, steakhouses. I'm like, well, I think that's pretty obvious why that's a problem. He goes, I put my thumb on it. But the problem is he labeled that vegan. And most wine, unless they use egg whites or the shellfish fining agent, they probably are vegan. And so, except then when somebody told me the other day, like, yeah, but when they pick the grapes, there's bugs and there's spiders and there's stuff, and they're not vegan, so and they get crushed into this wine sometimes. But the gluten-free part kind of fascinates me because why would there be gluten in a distilled spirit? I mean, how does that?
Right.
Where does that come from?
And that's a great question. So airborne cross plant contamination. So if you have a bottling facility that has, there are some wheat-based spirits out there that the distillation removes quite a bit of the gluten, if not most of it. But airborne molecules that have gluten in the plant actually are reintroducing or contaminating the product. So there are some major brands out there that do have trace amounts of gluten that for a celiac, they will have a reaction to consuming those alcohol products.
Wow.
So it is a real thing. And not just to have the letters non-GMO on your product, but to have it actually certified where it's getting tested to make sure that there is no gluten that exists in your finished product.
Is that tested to a certain tolerance or just a zero? Like, sulfites have so many, like 3 parts per million or something. You have
Yes.
to label the
To achieve the certification, it's tested to a particular
threshold.
yes.
So how do you get these spiked ices to freeze? Because over the years, there have been many attempts to make these things, and here, it sounds like you're successful.
Ours is at 15%, by the way.
Really? That's pretty
So
good.
there has been nobody else to figure out how to freeze alcohol above 8%. And most of the freeze and eat popsicles out there, and there are many today. I think the category has grown to be close to $1 billion category, and there's a lot of players in it today. But when we launched in 2019, we launched with a 15% freeze and eat popsicle, which was very difficult to do because alcohol doesn't freeze.
No.
We had to formulate by using some industry things that I was aware of in the dairy industry because I traded a lot of dairy commodities, worked with a lot of different ice cream manufacturers and processors. So we chose 15% for food safety because products that have 10% or greater ABV, it's impossible for bacteria to grow and to have any issues with food safety. So we started producing spiked ice at 15% with the idea that food safety, we wouldn't need preservatives. We could stay organic because our preservative was our organic alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But that took us to formulate and figure out. But when you look at, say, Dairy Queen ice cream, 80% air in that ice cream. So when
it's cheap, ingredients are cheap, huh?
Ingredients. Well, that's why Warren Buffett bought a big chunk of Dairy Queen. If you can sell air or water, you're
Yeah, you're doing
You're
good.
further ahead of everybody else. But when you look at the molecules of ice cream from Dairy Queen, it's spread out. There's air in there, which allows it to freeze and kind of puffy. And so we did the same type of technology in our spiked ice. Well received in like Las Vegas at the pool clubs.
Hmm.
Well received at the concerts and outdoor venues. But for your everyday person that was having a cocktail or a popsicle in their backyard, 15% is quite strong. So we changed it and moved it down to 12%. And for the last 2.5 years, all of our spiked ice that we produce is at 12% ABV. It freezes very well, great flavor profile. One of our biggest markets for our spiked ice is actually in Japan. We've been selling our spiked ice in Japan now. This is our third season, and it's a great market for us. They trend towards organic. They like forward flavored or forward alcohol. So a great market
That's
for us.
really interesting because Japanese, the culture of Japanese culture is a little further ahead than most Asian communities, and so they've already gone through the cycle of some of the things that China, for instance, Korea is just getting to, and so that's an interesting comment. And not only, you know, what drives me crazy about our industry in general is that the millennials drive me crazy anyway, even though I have three of them. But they they gravitate toward like this White Claw, which is just flavored up horrible stuff. I don't know how you drink it when there's some interesting alternatives like this one, or your Boxtails, which craft cocktails are very important. They're actually sort of encroaching into the wine industry space because of the generation. And we hope that the kids come out of those things and they think about this ethereal glass of wine late at night instead of um, moving into cocktails or continuing with cocktails. But the Boxtail thing, I really am impressed with. It's a very popular thing. The canned cocktails, canned wine. I have not figured out if canned wine is a real thing. If it's a real, I understand it's an industry and people are selling it. But what I get here, particularly in the spring when I put calls out for canned wines, I've had this huge variety of quality. Huge. Like in the beginning, those wines seemed like they were leftovers. They doctored them up. They threw a little more sulfur in there. They did whatever they could to put them in a can because who cares? It's going in a can. And that seems to be moving more towards quality wine in a can, vintage appellated wines that people would enjoy, whether it's in a can or not. Is that the same with the craft cocktails in a box? Are we seeing a raised level of quality, not just, well, we're throwing it in a can and it's, who cares?
Right. Well, when we created that product line and innovated, you know, boxed wine has been in the market for 20 years, right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
when boxed wine was introduced, and people were looking at that very skeptically, like, how is it going to taste, or will we get premium product in this type of delivery package? And you look at it today, and it's one of the biggest segments of where the volume moves.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't it amazing that up until the Boxtail, we haven't really had a national brand with box cocktails? It seems so obvious, but yet
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until we had COVID. We had all the on premise accounts locked down. We already had our spiked ice formula that was in the market at that time, about 2 years. And I'm looking at the consumers drinking at home, making cocktails at home, and seeing the seltzer craze, but we weren't going to be part of the seltzer craze. Another me too. We wanted to do something more innovative and more sustainable. And I'm looking at the boxed
Hmm.
wine and looking at our spiked ice, and I'm like, well, I know a co-packer that does bibs or bag and boxes, and it's actually right next door to where we're co-packing our spiked ice. Let's roll out a boxed cocktail with our
Uh,
same formulation as our spiked ice. We already had the formula. So you know how long it takes to file your TTB labels and go through that whole process. Um, when COVID was opening back up and markets were opening back up, we launched our organic Boxtails, and within 30 days from concept, we had production and our distributor was already rolling it out into the market. So very fast
Wow.
moving because we already had the formulations done.
Right.
On the consumer side, there was a huge learning curve that, you just didn't know until you got into it. But when consumers would go into the retailer and see, all the bottled spirits, they would see the boxed wines, and they would see this new box that's sitting amongst the spirits. Not everybody would know that it's cocktails,
Mm-hmm.
especially that spirit based cocktails. So we found that, consumer education with tastings and POS was essential to help that new category, box cocktails, start to get noticed as it's not a mixer, it's not wine. This is a new um, category for packaging with box cocktails. So we actually have no shelf life. We have say 5 years of shelf life for our box cocktails. They're
Wow.
shelf stable. They don't have to be refrigerated. You can, like box wine, you can pour your first glass, set it on the counter, and 5 months later, pour your second glass. Unlike boxed wine, of course, wine oxidizes once you open it. That's not the case with spirit based. And that's why I think one of the reasons why spirit based RTDs are definitely the growth segment for the industry, getting away from the malt and the wine based, because malt and wine based have generally been the go to for taxation reasons,
Mm-hmm.
distribution reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at the success of, say, High Noon compared to White Claw and Truly. High Noon is by far the front runner with spirit based, great distribution, great product, and now they have the ability to line extend into premium spirits. So if you're vodka based or rum based RTD, now you can move into
Mm-hmm.
a vodka or a
Mm-hmm.
rum or
Mm-hmm.
another spirit. So I think that you're going to see the growth, and it's similar to what happened in the soda industry starting out in the early 2000s. Consumer awareness of health and wellness has been on a constant upward trend. And on the soda side of the industry, soda sales have consistently gone down year over year for the last 22 years, about 3% per year.
Ouch.
And then you saw the progression into waters and energy drinks, and so beverage man or soda manufacturers have you've seen acquisitions of non-soda companies by them because they have to figure out the next thing that consumers are going to, and usually it's by smaller entrepreneurs that are out there going like Natural Product Expo in California and figuring out where the next trends are, and then
Mm-hmm.
they get it established and take the risk, and then get acquired by one of the big companies when they prove concept. And in the spirit or in the alcohol industry, I believe that the natural progression will be spirit based because I think the trends will be more towards spirit based RTDs.
Now I'm a traditionalist. I sort of um, take pride in the fact that I've studied and perfected, in my opinion, the classic cocktails, the Manhattans, the gin martinis, etc.,
Yes.
Vieux Carré and things. And so I have a great pride in using my mixer and strainer and making things happen. But my son-in-law, who used to be my engineer here, both my son-in-laws, actually, all three of them, have taken that spirit, sort of, no pun intended, to appreciate that. And one of them had the 5-year-old birthday party recently at a local park, and besides the sodas and the thing, where it's mostly High Noon, crafted cocktails. I'm like, what? How do you do that at a public park? And just as a come on, man, I make my own cocktails. I don't buy them in a can. But is this a bladder? Is your boxtails, are they in a bladder?
Yeah, they're a bit of a bag in a box.
Yeah.
But going back to your reference of High Noon, I mean, Gallo has done an amazing job at you know breaking into that market that was dominated by the two giants of White Claw and Truly, and Mark Anthony, kudos to their whole organization for starting the RTD seltzer market.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's absolutely a lot of growth potential for the boxed cocktail side, and consumers don't have to go through the the pains and mess of mixing. If you're going out on the boat or going
Yeah,
camping
right.
or doing whatever, you grab a boxtail that's shelf stable and go camping or go on the boat, or better yet, if you're high volume on premise and you want to remove labor and you want to reduce shrink, what better way than already pre-mixed mojito from
Mm-hmm.
in a 1.75 that has 14 cocktails that you're sourcing at $9 or $10 per, and it's way more efficient. You're going to have consistency with that product through and through. There's a lot of benefits to it.
I can see. I mean, frankly, being in the wine business, I would prefer that somebody buy a boxed cocktail rather than boxed wine. Boxed wine to me is sort of flies in the face of what a glass of wine should be. But that's just my own personal opinion. And consumerism is not in line with my personal opinion. But I can certainly see the idea, of a refrigerated box of a Manhattan or a Mojito or a Long Island iced tea or something. I think that's a fascinating idea, and certainly I would my vision would be that's got a huge growth potential, and people would get away from the cans. There's also this metallic. I've had the pleasure and the luxury and
Exactly.
the privilege of tasting wine that's the exact wine bottled the same day in glass and in canned, and they're different. I mean,
Absolutely.
they're different. Is this a?
Absolutely.
It's really fascinating. What First of all, let's go to distribution for a second. We're already at an hour, which is fascinating. But are you going through traditional distribution channels? Are you doing it yourself? What's your marketing of that? Your merchandising?
So in the US, we have to go through, of course, the distributor and the three-tiered system. However, one of the biggest segments of the market that we see, and we've already started to tap into it, is the international market.
Mm-hmm.
We've been shipping our box cocktails to Korea, to Guam, to Puerto Rico. In different parts of the world, they don't have the conveniences of refrigeration. And with a 12% ABV box cocktail, again, it's shelf stable, and that preservative is our organic alcohol. There isn't all the other
Mm-hmm.
sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate and all the
Mm-hmm.
other items in there. It's organic alcohol.
That's great.
Yeah, so
That's huge, actually.
more
What's
sustainable.
I'm trying to think of if I took my Templeton rye and made myself a Manhattan, 2 parts rye, 1 part vermouth, what my resulting net alcohol ABV would be. Probably a little higher than that, right?
Probably a little, but your typical cocktail is 15 to 17% ABV.
Oh, okay, so you're right in there.
It's
So
right in there.
what's next that we're gonna get you out of here? But what is next for you guys? What's your without disclosing any company secrets and turning the big guys onto something? But what are you guys playing with, or can we expect to see
So,
more products from Drake's Organic?
so recently, over the last 3 to 4 months, we've been doing as much PR as we possibly can to let the whole industry know that not only do we have a great award-winning organic spirit line that has all the certifications, but now we are making available our commercial volumes of organic award-winning cane alcohol to the industry, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's for the further manufacturing of food flavoring and fragrances, which is a huge segment of the industry using organic alcohol, or the craft distillers or any of the rectifiers. They too can source our organic cane alcohol. We
Mm.
produce annually over 3 to 4 million gallons, which is enough, and that's at 96%. So that's enough for, almost 11 to 12 million cases of alcohol,
Wow.
and that's just from one of our primary facilities in Colombia. So we have enough volume if, for instance, a high noon want to switch over to organic, or a truly, or you know, it
Hmm.
and up
Hmm.
until now, it just hasn't been commercially available because in the United States we don't grow organic sugarcane. It has to come from South America close to the equator.
So interesting. This has been fascinating, and I don't want to keep you from your show that you're going to, but I hope we can do it again because this it's so dynamic and the industry's dynamic, and I mean, frankly, from a guy that's been doing this for almost 35 years, never understand how there's more room for more premium spirits, but there seems to be, and now you're right on the cusp of a great growth spurt for organic spirits, and we look forward to seeing what you guys are doing. But it's Drake's Organic. What's the website?
Drakesorganic.com.
And is that a DTC site? Can people order right from the site?
They can.
Wow. We're going
They
to talk
can.
about. I'm just working on my Type 21 here in Southern California, which is I have a wholesale distilled spirits license, and that was really for my own consumption, so I can buy bourbon wholesale, some Pappy Van Winkle or whatever. And but we are working on our. We're in escrow for a Type 21 distilled spirits license, so we hope.
Congratulations.
And so would I go to RNDC or Southern, or who would I speak to about this?
Southern Glacier is our primary distributor across the U.S. Our international is direct with depending on which country we're going into. And yeah, people can
Interesting.
reach out to us at Drake's Organic. If you're looking for organic, high quality, award winning juice, we can supply the highest quality, 96% organic cane alcohol that has less than 5 parts per million of contaminants compared to the industry standard, which is 45 to 50. So very,
Wow,
very high quality.
pretty clean. Been a
Yes.
fascinating conversation, Mark. I really appreciate the time this morning, and again, I hope we can do it again. We'll get Kristen on next time and get her viewpoint on this journey that you guys are on. But I appreciate the time today.
Very enjoyable. Thank you, Paul. Thank you
Thank you for
very
the
much.
time. Cheers.
All right. Take care.
Take care.